My father said, "You're a disappointment. I'm cutting you off completely." I accepted it. That evening, I activated a trust fund he didn't know existed. A month later, he called me and his voice was shaking. My father said those words at the Oak Room in the Plaza Hotel at a dinner celebrating his 60th birthday. 73 people were there, including 3 senators, 2 judges, the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and most of my extended family. He stood at the head of the table, scotch in hand, and announced to everyone present that I was a disappointment to the family name and that he was cutting me off completely. No more allowance, no more trust fund access, no more family connections, no more using the family name to open doors. Effective immediately, I was financially on my own. Then he sat down and returned to his filet mignon like he'd just commented on the weather. I was 29 years old. I'd been sitting 3 seats down from him, wearing a suit I'd bought with my own money from teaching, not from his accounts. My hands were steady as I set down my wine glass. Everyone was staring at me, waiting for me to react, to beg, to defend myself, to make a scene. Instead, I looked at my father, nodded once, and said, "Understood." Then I stood up, walked out of the Oak Room, took a cab back to my apartment in Brooklyn, and made a phone call that would change everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'd been teaching high school English literature for 4 years when my father decided I was a disappointment worth disowning. Before that, I'd spent 2 years getting my master's in education at Columbia, and before that, 4 years at Yale studying comparative literature. My father, William Harrington, had tolerated my undergraduate degree because Yale was Yale, and at least I was at an Ivy League school where I could make the right connections. He'd been less pleased about the master's degree. "Education?" he'd said when I told him my plans. "What are you going to do with that, Teach?" When I said yes, actually, that was exactly the plan, his face had gone cold. "You're a Harrington. We don't teach. We build. We lead. We create empires." William Harrington had built his empire in commercial real estate development. Harrington Properties owned 43 buildings in Manhattan, 12 in Brooklyn, and investment properties in 6 other states. The company was worth approximately $460 million. My father had started with 1 building, a modest office complex in Queens, that his father, my grandfather, Thomas Harrington, had helped him purchase in 1987. Over 33 years, he'd built an empire through aggressive acquisitions, strategic partnerships, and ruthless business practices that had earned him respect and fear in equal measure. He'd expected me to join that empire, to learn the business from the ground up, to eventually take over as CEO when he retired. Instead, I'd become a high school English teacher making $58,000 a year. The breaking point had come 3 months before the birthday dinner. My father had called me to his office, the corner suite on the 43rd floor of the Harrington building in Midtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows, mahogany desk, photographs of him with presidents and governors lining the walls. He'd been sitting behind that desk when I arrived, reading something on his computer. He hadn't looked up when I sat down. "I'm giving you one more chance," he'd said, eyes still on the screen. "I've arranged an interview for you with our acquisitions team. Entry-level position, but it's a foot in the door. You start in 2 weeks. I'd said no. That's when he'd looked up. "No?" he'd repeated, like the word was foreign. "No," I'd confirmed. "I'm happy teaching. I'm good at it. I'm making a difference in these kids' lives." My father had leaned back in his chair, studying me like I was a disappointing investment. "You're wasting your potential," he'd said quietly. "You're wasting my legacy." I'd stood up to leave. "It's my life, Dad, not your legacy." That conversation had been the beginning of the end. My father had started making comments at family gatherings. Small digs at first. "Oh, here's my son, the teacher. Hope he's not corrupting young minds with his socialist literature." Then larger ones. "Must be nice to have summers off. Some of us work year-round." Then pointed questions about my financial situation. "How's that teacher's salary treating you? Can you afford rent in that neighborhood?" I'd ignored most of it. I'd learned early that engaging with my father's provocations only gave him ammunition. But the comments had gotten more frequent, more public, more designed to humiliate. And I'd kept teaching, kept living in my rent-stabilized 1-bedroom in Brooklyn, kept grading papers and discussing Fitzgerald and Morrison with 16-year-olds who actually cared about ideas more than quarterly earnings. My mother had died when I was 19. Ovarian cancer, stage 4, gone in 8 months. Her name had been Eleanor Harrington, born Eleanor Whitmore, daughter of Judge Edward Whitmore and his wife Catherine. Old money, the kind that didn't need to prove itself. My mother had married my father when she was 26, and I'd always suspected she'd regretted it. She'd been gentle, thoughtful, interested in art and music and literature. My father had been aggressive, ambitious, interested in buildings and money and power. They'd stayed married for 28 years, but I don't think they'd been happy for most of them. Before she died, my mother had pulled me aside in her hospital room. She'd been thin, fragile, her hair gone from chemotherapy. "Alex," she'd said, holding my hand, "I need to tell you something important. Your grandmother Catherine left you a trust fund. It's substantial. Your father doesn't know about it." I'd been confused. "Why doesn't Dad know?" She'd smiled weakly. "Because my mother didn't trust him. She wanted to make sure you'd be taken care of if anything happened to me, and she knew if your father found out about it, he'd find a way to control it. She'd squeezed my hand. The trust is set up through her estate attorney. You can't access it until you're 30, but when you do, you'll have complete control. No one can take it from you, not even your father. I'd been so focused on her illness, on the reality that I was losing my mother, that I hadn't really processed what she was saying. She'd given me a business card. This is Jeffrey Blackwood. He was my mother's attorney, and now he manages the trust. When you turn 30, call him. He'll explain everything. I'd put the card in my wallet and forgot about it in the grief and chaos of her death and funeral and the horrible months after. My father had thrown himself into work, spending even more time at the office, buying 2 more buildings, making deals like he could outrun his pain. I'd gone back to Yale, finished my degree, and tried to figure out who I was without my mother's steadying presence. 10 years had passed. The business card had stayed in my wallet, moving from one wallet to the next, a small piece of cardstock that I'd look at occasionally and wonder about. My 30th birthday was in 6 weeks. I hadn't called Jeffrey Blackwood yet. I'd been planning to, had been curious about what exactly my grandmother had left me. Probably enough for a down payment on a condo, I'd thought. Maybe $100,000. Enough to make my life a little easier, but not enough to change it fundamentally. I'd been wrong about that. The night of my father's birthday dinner, after I'd walked out of the Plaza Hotel and taken a cab back to Brooklyn, I'd sat on my couch and pulled out my wallet. The business card was there, slightly worn, the corners bent. Jeffrey Blackwood, attorney at law, Blackwood and Associates, an address in Midtown, a phone number, an email. I'd looked at my phone. It was 9:37 on a Saturday night, too late to call an attorney. But I'd been angry, hurt, humiliated by my father's public disavowal, and I'd needed to do something, anything, that felt like taking control. So I'd sent an email. Mr. Blackwood, my name is Alex Harrington. My mother was Eleanor Whitmore Harrington. She gave me your card before she passed away 10 years ago and told me to contact you when I turned 30. My birthday is in 6 weeks, but I'd like to schedule a meeting as soon as possible to discuss my grandmother's trust. Please let me know your availability. Best regards, Alex Harrington. I'd hit send and immediately felt ridiculous. It was Saturday night. He probably wouldn't see the email until Monday morning, if ever. The card was 10 years old. He might have retired, moved firms, died for all I knew. I'd put my phone down and tried to sleep, but my father's words kept echoing. Disappointment. Cutting you off completely. Like I'd been depending on him, like I'd been some spoiled trust fund kid living off his money. The truth was, I hadn't touched my father's money in 4 years, not since I'd started teaching. I'd lived off my salary, paid my own rent, bought my own groceries, managed my own life. The only connection to my father's wealth had been the annual family gatherings, the birthday dinners, the holiday parties where I was expected to show up and smile and pretend we were a functional family. My phone had buzzed at 11:49 that same night, an email from Jeffrey Blackwood. Mr. Harrington, I'm glad to hear from you. I've been managing your trust for the past 10 years and have been waiting for you to reach out. I'm available Monday morning at 9 a.m. if that works for your schedule. My office is at the address on the card. I look forward to meeting you. Regards, Jeffrey Blackwood. I'd stared at the email. He'd responded in 2 hours on a Saturday night. That seemed significant, though I wasn't sure why. I'd written back confirming the Monday meeting, then finally managed to fall asleep around 1 in the morning. Monday morning, I'd called in sick to school. First sick day I'd taken in 2 years. I'd taken the subway to Midtown, found the building, a sleek glass tower on 6th Avenue, and taken the elevator to the 38th floor. Blackwood and Associates occupied half the floor. The reception area had been elegant, understated, expensive in a way that didn't need to announce itself. The receptionist had been expecting me. Mr. Harrington, Mr. Blackwood is ready for you. Right this way. She'd led me to a corner office with a view of Central Park. Jeffrey Blackwood had been standing by the window, a man in his early 70s, silver hair, impeccable suit, the kind of presence that came from decades of handling other people's most important affairs. Alex, he'd said, shaking my hand. I'm so glad you finally reached out. Please, sit down. We'd sat in leather chairs by the window. He'd pulled out a leather portfolio. Your grandmother Catherine was a remarkable woman, he'd begun. She was also extremely intelligent about financial planning. When your mother married your father, Catherine became concerned about asset protection. She'd seen too many women lose control of their family wealth through marriage, and she wanted to ensure that wouldn't happen to Eleanor or to you. He'd opened the portfolio. Catherine established a trust for you when you were born. She funded it with $2 million initially, all from her own family money, completely separate from anything your grandfather earned. The trust was structured to grow through conservative investments, and with explicit instructions that neither your father nor anyone else could access it, alter it, or even know about it unless you chose to tell them. He'd pulled out a document. Your grandmother passed away when you were 8. Your mother became the trustee until your 30th birthday or her death, whichever came first. When your mother died, I became the trustee with instructions to manage the trust until you turned 30 or contacted me, whichever came first. I'd been listening, trying to process. $2 million. That was more than I'd expected, significantly more. Enough to pay off student loans, buy a place, have real financial security. That's incredibly generous, I'd said. I had no idea. Jeffrey had smiled. Alex, that was the initial funding 30 years ago. The trust has been growing for 3 decades. He'd handed me a statement. As of last Friday, the total value of the Catherine Whitmore Harrington Trust is $18.7 million. The number hadn't made sense at first. I'd stared at it. 18,700,000 and some change. I'm sorry, what? Jeffrey's smile had widened. Your grandmother was an exceptional investor. She structured the trust to invest primarily in index funds, real estate investment trusts, and blue-chip dividend stocks. Over 30 years, with reinvested dividends and compound growth, 2 million became 18.7 million. And as of your 30th birthday, which is November 15th, you will have full control of the entire amount. My hands had started shaking. I'd set down the statement. My father doesn't know about this. It hadn't been a question. Jeffrey had shaken his head. Your grandmother specifically forbade anyone from telling him. She didn't trust his judgment, and frankly, she didn't like him very much. She thought he was arrogant and controlling, and she wanted to ensure you'd have independence from him. I'd laughed, a short, shocked sound. She was right about that. Jeffrey had leaned forward. Alex, I need to be clear about something. This money is yours, completely and legally. Your father has no claim to it, no right to know about it, and no ability to touch it. But I need to know how you want to proceed. Do you want to activate the trust now, before your 30th birthday? I can arrange early access given the circumstances. Or do you want to wait the 6 weeks? I'd thought about my father standing up at that dinner, announcing to 73 people that I was a disappointment, that he was cutting me off. I'd thought about the years of comments, the subtle and not-so-subtle pressure to abandon my own dreams and join his empire. I'd thought about my mother's gentle voice in that hospital room, telling me I'd be taken care of. I want to activate it now, I'd said. What do I need to do? Jeffrey had pulled out more documents. Sign here, here, and here. I'll need identification, which I'm sure you brought. And then I'll need to know where you'd like the funds transferred. I'd recommend setting up accounts with a wealth management firm, but that's your decision. I'd signed the papers, my hand steadier now. I have a regular checking account at Chase. Jeffrey had looked pained. Alex, you're about to have $18.7 million. You need proper wealth management, tax planning, estate planning, investment strategy. I can recommend several excellent firms, or you can choose your own, but please don't just dump this into a regular checking account. He'd given me 3 names. I'd chosen the second one, Whitfield Capital Management, because the name reminded me of my mother's maiden name, Whitmore, and because their philosophy seemed conservative and sensible. Jeffrey had called them right there from his office, spoken to someone named Thomas Whitfield himself, and arranged a meeting for that afternoon. Thomas is one of the best, Jeffrey had assured me. He's discreet, intelligent, and he won't try to talk you into risky investments. He'll set you up properly. I'd left Jeffrey's office 2 hours after arriving, walking out onto 6th Avenue with a leather folder full of documents and the strange, surreal knowledge that I was worth $18.7 million. I'd gotten coffee from a cart, sat on a bench in Bryant Park, and tried to absorb it. My father thought he'd cut me off, left me struggling, forced me to come crawling back. Instead, I had more money than I'd ever imagined, more independence than he could take away, and more choices than he could control. The meeting with Thomas Whitfield that afternoon had been equally surreal. His offices were in the financial district, understated elegance, quiet wealth. Thomas himself had been 50-something, calm, methodical, the kind of person who inspired confidence through competence rather than charisma. Jeffrey told me about your situation, he'd said after we'd settled in his office. First, congratulations on your trust. Your grandmother was wise. Second, I need to understand your goals. What do you want this money to do for you? I'd thought about it. I want to keep teaching, I'd said. I don't want to change my life dramatically. I like what I do, but I want security, independence, and I want to be able to make choices without worrying about money. Thomas had nodded. Conservative growth, low risk, steady income if you need it. That's manageable. We'd spent 3 hours going over options, tax implications, estate planning basics, investment strategies. By the end, we'd set up a structure that would generate approximately $600,000 annually in income if I wanted to draw on it, while still growing the principal. You don't have to touch that income, Thomas had said. You can let it reinvest and keep growing, but it's there if you want it. I'd walked out of Thomas Whitfield's office at 6:43 in the evening, taken the subway back to Brooklyn, and entered my apartment feeling like I'd lived 3 different lifetimes in one day. My phone had been buzzing with messages, 5 from my father. We need to talk. Call me immediately. I meant what I said at dinner. You're making a mistake. You have 1 week to apologize and I'll reconsider. I'd deleted them all. 3 messages from my aunt, my father's sister Patricia. Your father told me what happened. I'm so sorry, Alex. If you need anything, please call me. I think your father is being unreasonable. You're doing important work. I've always been proud of you. Don't let him make you feel small. I'd called her back. She'd answered on the first ring. Alex, honey, are you okay? I'd told her I was fine, that I appreciated her support, that I was going to be all right. Your father is angry that you won't conform to his vision, she'd said. But you're your mother's son. You have her heart. Don't lose that to please him. I'd spent the next 2 weeks living in strange duality. At school, I was still Alex Harrington, English teacher, grading essays on The Great Gatsby and helping students understand metaphor and theme. At home, I was Alex Harrington, unexpected millionaire, learning about tax loss harvesting and qualified dividends and estate planning. The money had been transferred to accounts Thomas had set up. I could see it when I logged into the wealth management portal, numbers that still didn't feel entirely real. I'd paid off my student loans, all $63,000 of them, in one payment. I'd set up a meeting with a real estate broker to look at apartments to buy. I'd done nothing else. Didn't buy a car, didn't take a vacation, didn't tell anyone except my Aunt Patricia, and only because she'd called me crying one night saying my father had stopped talking to her because she'd defended me. My father had tried calling me 4 more times in those 2 weeks. I'd ignored every call. Then the emails had started. Professional, cold, treating me like a business problem he needed to solve. Alex, this situation is untenable. We need to discuss your future. I'm willing to meet with you to outline options for reconciliation, but you need to demonstrate maturity and responsibility. I deleted those too. Then he'd started using his connections. My principal, Dr. Lawrence Kensington, had called me into his office on a Wednesday afternoon. Alex, I need to ask you about something sensitive, he'd said, looking uncomfortable. I received a call yesterday from William Harrington, who I understand is your father. My stomach had dropped. What did he want? Lawrence had sighed. He wanted to know about your employment status, your performance, whether there were any concerns about your teaching. I told him that was confidential personnel information, and I couldn't discuss it. But Alex, he's making calls. He mentioned he's on the board of several educational foundations that provide funding to schools. He seemed to be implying that your continued employment here might affect those relationships. I'd felt cold rage settle in my chest. He's trying to get me fired. Lawrence had held up his hand. He's trying to pressure you, and he's using his influence to do it. I want you to know that won't work with me. You're an excellent teacher. Your students love you. Your performance reviews are outstanding. As long as you want to teach here, you have a job here. But I thought you should know what he's doing. I'd thanked him, gone back to my classroom, and taught my next period class on automatic pilot. After school, I'd called Jeffrey Blackwood. My father is trying to interfere with my employment. Can he do that legally? Jeffrey had been quiet for a moment. He can make calls, use his influence, try to create pressure. Whether that's legal depends on what he says and how he says it. If he's making false statements, that could be defamation. If he's using his position on boards to threaten funding in retaliation for your school employing you, that could be tortious interference. Would you like me to send him a cease and desist letter? I'd thought about it. Not yet, but be ready. The 3rd week, my father had escalated further. He'd called a family meeting, summoned my Aunt Patricia, my Uncle George, my cousin Rebecca, and my grandmother's sister, my great-aunt Constance, all to his office. Patricia had called me afterward, furious. He told everyone you're being ungrateful and irresponsible, she'd said. He painted this picture of you as some spoiled kid who's throwing away opportunities to play at being a teacher. He asked everyone to cut off contact with you until you come to your senses. George agreed, of course. He always does whatever William wants. Rebecca looked uncomfortable but didn't say anything. Constance told him he was being a bully and walked out. Constance had called me herself that evening. She was 86, sharp as ever, my grandmother Catherine's younger sister. Alex, your grandmother would be furious with your father right now, she'd said without preamble. She never liked him, thought he was pompous and controlling. She'd be proud of you for standing up to him. I'd felt my throat tighten. I wish I could have known her better. She knew you well enough, Constance had said. She used to say you had her eyes and her heart. That's why she left you that trust fund, you know. I'd frozen. You know about the trust? Constance had laughed. Of course I know. Catherine told me about it when she set it up. She made me promise not to tell your father, not to tell anyone. But she said when you turned 30, when you came into the money, I should tell you the truth. She didn't just want you to have financial independence. She wanted you to have the freedom to be yourself, to make choices based on what mattered to you, not what William demanded. She saw how he treated your mother, always dismissing her interests, her values, her gentleness. She didn't want him to do the same to you. I'd been quiet, processing this. He's trying to destroy my career now, calling my school, pressuring my principal. Constance's voice had gone hard. Then perhaps it's time you showed him who you really are. Week 4, my father had called me directly for the first time in 26 days. I'd been in my apartment, grading papers, when my phone had rung. I'd considered not answering, but something made me pick up. Hello? Alex. My father's voice had been cold, controlled. We need to talk. This has gone on long enough. I'm listening. I've given you time to reconsider your position, time to realize that your current path is unsustainable. You can't support yourself on a teacher's salary, not in the long term. You need family connections, family resources, family support. I'm willing to reinstate your access to those resources if you agree to certain conditions. What conditions? My voice had been flat. You join Harrington Properties in a junior acquisitions role. You work there for at least 3 years. You demonstrate commitment to the family business. In return, I'll restore your trust fund access, help you purchase a proper apartment, and restore your position in the family. I'd almost laughed. He thought he still had control. Thought he was offering me something I needed. I don't need your help to purchase an apartment, I'd said. I'm closing on a place next week. 2-bedroom condo in Park Slope. I paid cash. Silence. How did you pay cash? That's not your concern. My father's voice had risen. Alex, don't play games with me. Where did you get that kind of money? Did you take out a loan? Because if you're mortgaging your future... I didn't take out a loan. I used my own money. You don't have that kind of money. You're a teacher. I have exactly that kind of money, and I earned it by being born to the right grandmother. Another silence, longer this time. What are you talking about? Grandmother Catherine left me a trust fund, a substantial one. It became mine this month. I'm financially independent, Dad. I don't need your money, your connections, or your approval. I'm keeping my teaching job because I want to, not because I have to. My father's voice had changed, become dangerous. Your grandmother left you money? How much? Enough. Eleanor knew about this? Mom was the trustee until she died. Then it was managed by grandmother's attorney until I turned 30. I could hear my father breathing, controlling his anger. And you didn't think to tell me? Your own father? Grandmother explicitly instructed that you not be told. She didn't trust you with the information. That's absurd. I'm your father. I have a right. You have no rights to money that was never yours. Grandmother's estate, her decisions, her trust. None of it involved you. My father's voice had gone very quiet. How much money are we talking about? Enough that I'll never need anything from you. I'd hung up. The phone had started ringing again immediately. I'd turned it off, sat in the silence of my apartment, and felt something like relief. He knew now. The secret was out. Whatever happened next would happen with all the cards on the table. I'd turned my phone back on an hour later. 17 missed calls from my father, 9 voicemails. I'd deleted them without listening. 3 calls from Patricia. I'd called her back. He's losing his mind, she'd said. He called me screaming about how Mother and Eleanor conspired against him, how his own wife kept secrets, how you betrayed him by not telling him about the money. I didn't betray anyone, I'd said. Grandmother wanted it this way. I know, and I'm glad. William has controlled this family with money and fear for too long. It's about time someone had power he couldn't touch. The final confrontation had happened 1 month after the birthday dinner, almost to the day. My father had shown up at my school. It was a Friday afternoon, last period. I'd been teaching a discussion of Invisible Man when the classroom door had opened and Principal Kensington had looked in. Mr. Harrington, could I see you for a moment? I'd stepped into the hallway. My father had been standing there, in the administrative corridor of a public high school, looking completely out of place in his $3,000 suit. Your father insists on speaking with you, Kensington had said, his tone making it clear what he thought of this interruption. I told him you were teaching, but he said it was urgent. I'd looked at my father. I'm in the middle of class. This can't wait, my father had said. We need to talk. Now. I'd looked at Kensington. Can you cover my class for 10 minutes? We're just doing discussion. They can continue without me. He'd nodded, and I'd led my father to an empty classroom down the hall. We'd stood there among desks covered in teenage graffiti, posters about Shakespeare and Toni Morrison on the walls, and my father had looked around like he'd entered a foreign country. This is where you work? He'd asked, contempt clear in his voice. This is where I teach, yes. You could have an office on the 43rd floor. Instead, you're here, in this... He'd gestured around. Place. I chose this place. What do you want, Dad? My father had turned to me. I want to understand what happened. Your mother kept secrets from me. My own wife, for our entire marriage, knew about this trust fund and never said a word. She let me think you'd be dependent on me, that I'd have influence over your choices, your future. I'd felt anger rising. She let you think that because you would have tried to control it if you'd known, just like you're trying to control me now. I'm your father. I'm trying to guide you. You're trying to force me into a life I don't want. There's a difference. My father had stepped closer. You don't understand what you're throwing away. The family business, the legacy, the connections, the power. You could have all of it, and instead, you're teaching teenagers about books that won't matter in their lives. Those books matter more than you'll ever understand, I'd said quietly. They teach empathy, critical thinking, how to see the world through someone else's eyes. That matters more than quarterly earnings. My father had laughed, harsh and bitter. You sound just like her, just like Eleanor, with her head in the clouds, her art galleries and her poetry. She wasted her potential too. Don't talk about Mom like that. Why not? It's true. She married me, had access to everything my success built, and she spent her time on frivolous pursuits instead of supporting my work, building something real. I'd stared at him. She supported you for 28 years. She went to your dinners, smiled for your photographs, played the perfect wife while you built your empire. And she was miserable, Dad. You made her miserable. That's not true. It is true. I was there. I saw how she'd light up when she talked about the museum, about books, about anything that wasn't your business. And I saw how she'd dim when you came home and criticized her for wasting time instead of networking with the right people. My father's face had flushed. Your mother was free to do what she wanted. No, she wasn't. Because every time she did something for herself, you made her feel guilty about it. Just like you're doing to me now. My father had been quiet for a moment. Then he'd said, I'm not going to support your choice to waste your life, Alex. If you want to throw away your potential, fine. But don't expect me to watch it happen. Don't expect me to pretend I'm proud of you. I'd felt something break inside me, some last hope that he might understand, might see me for who I was, instead of who he wanted me to be. I don't expect anything from you anymore, I'd said. I have my own money, my own life, my own choices. You can't control any of it. My father had smiled, cold and sharp. You think $18 million makes you independent? Alex, I'm worth 10 times that. I have connections in every major institution in this city. I can make your life very difficult if I want to. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining reality. You want to teach? Fine. But I know people on the Board of Education. I know people who control funding for schools. I know people who can make sure your idealistic little career becomes very complicated. I'd pulled out my phone and started recording. Say that again. My father had looked at the phone, and his expression had changed. What are you doing? Making sure there's a record of you threatening to use your influence to sabotage my career. That's called tortious interference, Dad. Jeffrey Blackwood already explained it to me. My father's face had gone pale. Jeffrey Blackwood is your grandmother's attorney. He's my attorney now, and he's very good at his job. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave my school. You're going to stop calling my principal. Stop threatening funding. Stop using your connections to interfere with my life. And if you don't, Jeffrey is going to file a lawsuit that will make your business practices and your personal conduct very public. How do you think your board of directors would feel about that? How do you think your investors would feel? My father had stared at me. You'd sue your own father? You disowned your own son in front of 73 people. Yes, I'd sue you if you keep threatening my livelihood. We'd stood there in that empty classroom, and for the first time in my life, I'd seen my father look uncertain. I never wanted this, he'd said finally. Never wanted what? This distance, this conflict. I wanted you in the family business. I wanted to build something together, pass it on to you. You wanted me to be you, I'd corrected. That's not the same thing. My father had turned toward the door, then stopped. Your mother would be disappointed in you. The words had been designed to hurt, and they did. But I'd thought about my mother in that hospital bed, about the trust fund she'd kept secret to protect me, about Aunt Constance saying I had grandmother's heart. No, I'd said quietly. She'd be proud. She's the one who made this possible. My father had left without another word. I'd watched him walk down the hallway, past the lockers and the motivational posters and the drinking fountain with the broken button, and disappear around the corner. Then I'd gone back to my classroom, where Principal Kensington was discussing Invisible Man with my students, and I'd finished teaching the period like nothing had happened. That night, Patricia had called me. William called a family meeting. He wants everyone to take his side against you. He's painting you as ungrateful, manipulative, using grandmother's money to betray the family. Are you going? Of course. Someone needs to represent sanity. She'd paused. Alex, I have an idea. What if you came too? I wasn't invited. That doesn't matter. Show up. Face him. Show everyone that you're not hiding, that you're not ashamed. Bring your attorney if you want, but don't let William control the narrative. I'd thought about it. When is it? Tomorrow night, 7 p.m., his office. I'll be there. I'd called Jeffrey Blackwood immediately. He'd listened to my plan and said, I'll be there with you. Let me bring one more person. Dana Osgood. She's our firm's senior litigator. If this turns into something legal, I want her there. The next evening, I'd arrived at my father's office building at 6:55. Jeffrey and Dana were waiting in the lobby. Dana Osgood was 40-something, precisely dressed, the kind of attorney who could make a judge nervous with just her tone of voice. Alex, she'd said, shaking my hand. Jeffrey briefed me on the situation. I've prepared a cease and desist letter, just in case. I've also documented your father's threats regarding your employment. If he continues this pattern of interference, we have grounds for a restraining order and a civil suit. We'd taken the elevator to the 43rd floor. The conference room was already full. My father at the head of the table, Uncle George to his right, my cousin Rebecca next to George, Aunt Patricia on the left side, and Great Aunt Constance beside her. They'd all looked up when I'd walked in with two attorneys. My father's expression had been unreadable. What is this? This is me protecting my interests, I'd said. Jeffrey Blackwood, my estate attorney. Dana Osgood, my litigation attorney. I thought they should be present for this family meeting. My father had stood up. This is a private family matter. I don't want attorneys here. Then you should have made it a private family matter instead of a public campaign to destroy my career, I'd said. I'd sat down at the opposite end of the table from my father. Jeffrey and Dana had flanked me. Alex, I think there's been a misunderstanding, my father had started. No misunderstanding, I'd interrupted. You threatened to use your influence to interfere with my employment. You called my principal. You've been contacting people on educational boards. That's tortious interference, and it stops tonight. Uncle George had leaned forward. Your father is just concerned about your future, Alex. There's no need for legal threats. There's every need when he's actively trying to sabotage that future because I won't do what he wants. I'd pulled out my phone, played the recording from the school hallway. My father's voice, clear and unmistakable. I know people on the Board of Education. I know people who control funding for schools. I know people who can make sure your idealistic little career becomes very complicated. The room had gone silent. Rebecca had looked shocked. Patricia had been smiling grimly. Constance had actually laughed. William, she'd said, you've made yourself sound like a movie villain. My father's face had flushed red. That was a private conversation. That was a threat, Dana Osgood had said calmly. And it's documented. Mr. Harrington, you need to understand something. Alex doesn't need your money. He doesn't need your approval. And if you continue to interfere with his career, his life, or his choices, we will pursue every legal remedy available. That includes a restraining order, a civil suit for damages, and potentially a public disclosure of your conduct that would be very embarrassing for Harrington Properties. My father had looked at me. You'd really do this? Destroy our relationship completely? You destroyed it? I'd said. When you stood up at your birthday dinner and called me a disappointment in front of 73 people. When you cut me off thinking it would force me to crawl back. When you threatened my career because I wouldn't obey you. I didn't destroy anything, Dad. You did. Patricia had spoken up then. William, I've watched you bully this family for 20 years. You bullied Eleanor into giving up her art. You bullied George into working for you even though he hated it. You tried to bully Alex into being your clone. And now that he has the independence to say no, you can't handle it. This isn't your concern, Patricia, my father had snapped. It is my concern when you call family meetings to turn everyone against a young man whose only crime is choosing his own path. Constance had added. Catherine saw this coming, William. That's why she set up that trust. She knew you'd try to control Alex with money. She gave him a way out. My father had looked around the table, and for the first time, I'd seen him realize he wasn't in control. This is my family, my company, my legacy. And Alex is his own person, Patricia had said. Let him be. The meeting had ended without resolution. My father had refused to apologize. I'd refused to back down. But Dana Osgood had handed him a cease and desist letter before we left. No more calls to his employer, no more threats, no more interference. If you violate this, we'll see you in court. We'd left the building together, and on the sidewalk, Patricia had hugged me. Your mother would be so proud, she'd whispered. Constance had patted my shoulder. Catherine, too. You have her spine. I'd gone home that night feeling exhausted but clear. The relationship with my father was broken, probably irreparably, but I was free. 1 month later, I was in my new apartment in Park Slope, hanging pictures in the living room, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I'd almost not answered, but something made me pick up. Hello? Alex. My father's voice had been different, quiet, strained. I need to talk to you. We have nothing to talk about unless you're apologizing. I'm calling because something's happened, something you need to know. His voice had shaken, and that's when I'd realized something was wrong. What happened? Harrington Properties is being investigated. The SEC, they're looking into some of our financing structures, some partnerships from 5 years ago. They're calling it fraud. I'd sat down heavily on my couch. Is it fraud? Silence. Dad, is it fraud? Some of the deals were aggressive, structured to minimize tax exposure. I didn't think anyone would look that closely. Who's looking? Federal prosecutors. They executed a search warrant yesterday. Took files, computers, everything. The board is panicking. Our investors are demanding answers. Alex, this could destroy everything. I'd close my eyes. Why are you calling me? Because I need help. I need someone I can trust, someone who understands what's at stake. You cut me off completely. You called me a disappointment. You threatened my career. Why would I help you? My father's voice had cracked. Because I'm your father. Because I made mistakes. Because I'm asking. I'd been quiet, thinking. What kind of help? Financial, legal. The investigation is going to be expensive to defend. The board is talking about removing me as CEO. I might need to buy them out to maintain control. I don't have the liquidity for that. I'd almost laughed. You're asking me for money? After everything? I'm asking my son for help. Your son who isn't good enough for the family business? Your son who's wasting his potential teaching? I was wrong about that. I see that now. Alex, please. I'd stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the Brooklyn street below. I'm going to think about it, I'd said. I'll call you back in 24 hours. I'd hung up before he could respond. Then I'd called Jeffrey Blackwood and told him everything. What do you think? I'd asked. Jeffrey had been quiet for a long moment. I think your father is facing the consequences of his own choices. I also think you have an opportunity here. If you help him, it needs to be on your terms. Complete transparency, legal protection for yourself, and maybe, finally, some respect. 24 hours later, I'd called my father back. I'll help you on 3 conditions. 1, you publicly acknowledge what you said at your birthday dinner was wrong and apologize. 2, you stop interfering with my career and my life, permanently. 3, any financial help I provide is structured as a loan with full legal documentation. I'm not giving you money. I'm lending it at market rates, with collateral. My father had been quiet. Those are harsh terms. Those are fair terms. Take them or leave them. Another silence. I'll take them. Good. Have your attorney contact Jeffrey Blackwood. They'll work out the details. Alex? Yeah? Thank you. Don't thank me. Just be better. 6 months later, the SEC investigation was ongoing, but my father had managed to settle with the board, maintain control of Harrington Properties, and begin restructuring the company's practices to comply with federal regulations. He'd paid back my loan, with interest, ahead of schedule. He'd also, to my surprise, shown up at my school. It had been a Thursday afternoon, and I'd been in my classroom after the final bell, grading papers. There'd been a knock on the door. My father had been standing there, looking uncomfortable in jeans and a sweater instead of his usual suit. Can I come in? I gestured to a chair. He'd sat down, looked around at the posters and the books and the evidence of student work covering every surface. I never understood this, he'd said finally. What you do here, why it matters to you. And now? I'm starting to. I've been seeing a therapist. She's helping me understand some things about control, about fear, about why I needed you to be me instead of you. I'd set down my pen. That's good, Dad. I owe you a real apology, not just for the birthday dinner, for years of making you feel like you weren't enough, for trying to control your life, for not seeing that your mother was right about you. You have her heart. That's not a weakness. It's a strength. I'd felt my throat tighten. Thank you. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you think we can rebuild this? Us? Our relationship? I'd thought about it. I don't know. Maybe. But it has to be different. You have to see me. Dad. Really see me. Not who you want me to be. I'm trying. Then maybe. My father had stood up, looked around one more time. Your students are lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have them. He'd walked to the door, then turned back. Your grandmother would be proud of you, you know. Hell, your mother would be proud of you. I should have told you that years ago. You're telling me now, I'd said. That's a start. He'd left, and I'd sat there in the quiet classroom, surrounded by the evidence of lives I was helping shape, and felt something like peace. The trust fund had given me financial independence, but standing up to my father, refusing to be small, insisting on being seen, that had given me something more valuable. It had given me myself. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.